Now, Hudur, what about the promised Messiah or the Imam Mahdi himself? Can we have an idea about his history?
Hadhrat Imam Mahdi, as we refer to him, or Al-Masih al-Maud, as I've already told you, that he was born in year 1835 in that house which I mentioned. We had migrated from long ago, in the time of Babur, from Persia, Faris, and had come and settled in the Punjab. When he was born, it was very difficult. They were very difficult times. There were fights and infights between Muslims and Sikhs and the British and the locals and so on. Turbulent times. So Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, right from the beginning, was totally dedicated to the service of God and the service of the poor. That we know not only from his own memories, but from the Hindus and non-Muslim people who lived in that township. They have given their testimonies, and I have met some of them myself who had lived long enough to give their testimony before me, like Baba Malava Mal, a Hindu leader of Qadian, and many others, who always mentioned with deep regard and respect Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad of Qadian. Why? Because right from his childhood, he was a man given up to God and his creation. He loved God so much that he kept on studying the Holy Quran day in and day out, and Hadith and Islamic literature, and used to go to the mosque. All had left. When all the others had left, he would remain there and keep on praying, individually, Nawafil, etc. So this is the testimony of all the people of Qadian of that period, that this is how he spent his childhood. His father's testimony is mentioned by some Sikhs who came from other parts of Qadian, and inquired from his father that we understand we have also a son who is seldom seen. Where is he? What is he doing? There were other members of the family who lived like small royal family, but he said there is one son who we never see him, but we understand you have. He said he has become a Masih. Masih means in Punjabi language, one who has been wedded to the mosque, one who remains in the mosque and never comes out. So he said, go and find out, maybe he is wrapped in some mats of the mosque. Because sometimes it happened that when he was tired, he laid down for a rest, and the servant who attended the mosque came and rolled down those mats. And it actually happened that once he was rolled in that but he didn't shriek, he didn't protest. He softly, after he left, he came out himself. But this is what I'm telling you was his natural childhood, his infancy and childhood. As far as the mankind is concerned, it can be seen from this that he was always sharing his food in the childhood with the poor boys of his age in that area. And it was as if it was a regular practice with him. He never sat with the family members to eat. He said, all right, give me my food, I'll go out and eat. And then he shared it with others. Sometimes he distributed all the food, which was reasonably good family, so the food must have been good by any standards. And at only some small, what do they call, grams and maize, etc., which are, उसको क्या कहते हैं भूनने के लिए, baked. It was not baked, it was sort of cooked, with sand. It is a custom in our country. I don't know any English word for this.
Yes, it is baked. If it is in sand.
With sand.
Yes, it is baked.
In your country,
yes.
Right. So he would buy a very cheap thing. Half a paisa would be 100th part of a penny now. And he bought that And at that and then quarter, that was all for him. So throughout his childhood, he spent his life like this. When he grew up, his father insisted that he must find some service because he said that you are worthless as far as our estate is concerned. I can't make any use of you. But other children are growing up and getting education and doing things. So you are only for God, and this is not according to our family tradition. We're a sort of, ruling family, although poor nowadays, but still ruling family. So your behavior is no credit to us. So he insisted that I'll get you some service in a court in Sialkot district, in the city of Sialkot, because he had some influence over here and there. He insisted first of all that no, I will not do that. And in answer to this, his insistence once, he wrote only this much, or sent a message, I don't exactly remember, that look here, you asked for my service. I have already been enrolled in the service of God. What other service do you want? But the father insisted. I said, it's my order. He said, all right, if it's your order, then my God tells me that you obey your parents, so I'm going to do that. So he served for a couple of years or so in Sialkot district court as a sort of clerk or at a small post, but there we find other witnesses outside Qadian, who were non-Ahmadis, who were people of great respect in their district, and later on some rose to the Punjab fame, who were deeply impressed by the quality of his piety. There was an ordinary clerk-looking person, but always he was involved in debates with the Christians representing Islam. So the court was a Christian court, and here was the small employee who spent all his time in taking up the cudgel for Islam and fighting the Christians and challenging them about Christ's claims and this and that, and in comparison to the Holy Quran, they said Bible is just nothing, I can prove it, that it's all interpolated and so on. So that was the second phase of his early life. But this small correction, this shahadat reached us not from his father,
from the people,
but from the Sikhs,
yes,
who had visited Qadian, who knew him. Then when later on when Misr claimed to be this, then they came and said, look here, now we know why. Why this man was chosen by God, because this is what we know from his early childhood. No, it was in Sialkot that one of his early contacts, his early communion with God or God's care for him was reported. There's many reports, but I'm not going into the detail. I'm just in relation to Sialkot, where he served for some time in the court of law. There once he, along with some others, he was residing in a small room which was on the second floor or the first floor. And it was night and they were all asleep. Then he got up and he said, look here, I hear the sound of this girder. It was in fact a wooden beam. I hear a sound from the wooden beam that I'm going to break, as if it's going to break. So let's go out. He said, you hear these things, come on. Don't disturb, let us sleep. He didn't go out himself. After a while he said, look here, it's dangerous to remain here. Come on, let's go out. They said no. The third time he shook them up. He said, for God's sake, what are you doing? I'm telling you, this roof is going to fall. And he did not leave he did not lead them. He stayed behind until all of them had vacated the room. And this is on the witness of those people who were there themselves present. So impressed. As they were going downstairs, they wanted to go to the room underneath, then the roof fell. And it fell with such violence that it also smashed the roof below on the floor of which they were sleeping. And this also hit the ground. And it's how Allah ordained. They were on the staircase, one after the other, when this accident happened. If they had gone earlier, they would all have been killed. So this was right from the beginning. We have reports of his receiving favors from Allah. Dreams which came to be fulfilled, visions which came to be fulfilled, even revelations started. And the first revelation which he received was about the death of his father. And from then on, the whole thing continued into a sort of stream of revelations which ended up only with his life. After this,
Yes, Hadhrat, what was his age at that time?
At that time, I think he should be very young, because I tell you, at the time of his father's death, he was about, his father died in 64.
60.
Huh?
30 years.
About 30 years. At the time of the death of his father, he was 30 years.
Yes.
And he was appointed by God as not as Al-Mahdi, as Masih, but as one who would represent, who was made a Mamur, we should say. The first revelation of Mamuriyat, that is, I commission you, let's say commissioning. The first time he was commissioned in 1882. That was in fact the beginning of his official representation of Islam, which went through many stages later on. So we are talking of a period before, it was 74 when his father died, or before?
I think it was 65.
64 or 65. Find out from later on, maybe we will tell you again. But he must have been younger than 30, around 25 or so. Now, at the time of the death of his father, which took place in 74, just before the night when he died, he received his first revelation. Previously, it was dreams and visions, and like this, impression that that beam is saying something, telling me that there's danger.
Feeling.
Yes, feeling. The first revelation was samai wa tariq. He didn't say Najm al-Thaqib, only that much. Now his father was terminally ill in those days. So when he heard this, he felt very sad, because he understood that that night the father would die. وَالسَّمَاءِ وَالطَّارِقِ وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا الطَّارِقِ. So he understood the message. But then something happened. He thought that I have never paid attention to my own shares in the property of the family. I don't know who does what and what is the income and what is my share in this and that. Whatever my father and mother out of pity sent me by way of food or clothing, that is all I know. So what would happen to me afterwards? This is what he thought. And the second revelation came then, with great, glory and majesty, and also a sense of, sort of disapproval of that thought. And that was, Alaysa Allahu bi kafin abda? Is God not sufficient for his servant? This shook him right to the foundations. He cried and sought forgiveness from Allah. He said, forgive me. You were my before and you will be my afterwards, and I don't care for who dies and what happens to him. And what a beautiful thing happened, which was much before he was appointed by God. He had such faith in that revelation that he sent someone to Amritsar, a town, big city in fact nowadays, 36 miles away to the west from Qadian. Because in those days in Qadian, no one could make a signet ring where you could, a khatam where with which you can seal a thing. So he told him to go to Amritsar, find a good expert, and tell him to make a ring for me with this alaysallahu bi kafin abdahu, engraved over that, so that I never forget this message again. And this is that ring. See, this is it. How it came to my hand. It's a very interesting story.
Grace of Allah.
When he died, it so happened that at different times he had different revelations which he also likewise had got engraved on rings. And it was 4 rings which he was bearing. And he left behind 4 children. 3 sons. 3 sons. They drew lots. 2 of those signet rings came to the share of my father, and 1 to my uncle and 1 to the younger uncle. Maybe a small mistake here and there, but it's not a conscious mistake. Roughly, as I remember things, this is what happened. Now, the most important thing on which everybody's eyes was this ring. The first is a very special ring. So instead of fighting among themselves as to who should get this ring, they drew the lots, and this fell to the lot of my father. Now, he wore all his life, but when he died, he made a will that this ring is far too important to be considered a family property. This belongs to the Jamaat Ahmadiyya. So after me, whoever will be the Khalifa, he will wear this ring. So after him, Hadhrat Mirza Nasir Ahmad, my eldest brother, happened to be the Khalifa. So he received it not as a family property, but as by virtue of his being the Caliph. So he wore this ring all his life. After he died, and when I was elected with the grace of Allah to this office, then those who were in charge of things which he had left behind, they came and brought me this ring and said, now this belongs to you. As long as you are Khalifa, till death of course, you will wear this. So this is the story, background story I've told you already.
Inshallah.
Alaysallahu bi kafin abda. Now, shall we meet tomorrow again, inshallah?
Inshallah.
Right.
Yes.
It's a long story, very interesting.
Yes, this is a very important
But let me
story.
refer to you of something with relation to Hadhrat Masih Islam's claim that he was appointed by God. His enemies, which abound in Pakistan and other, even some Arab countries, they claim that he was appointed by the British government as their agent. And it is the Sialkot contact with the British government which they quote as the starting point. When he was 25 years old, and he was a small clerk, and the British in that period would never dream of appointing a small clerk of 25 years to represent them and to make the claim that he is the Messiah. This is the sum total of their wisdom. They think it was there that he came into contact. But afterwards he never came into contact with them. And the only contact he established was with the small Christian priests who were always, running about in the courts, delivering the message of Christianity. So to save the Muslims and others from Christian onslaught, he always came to confront them. And he was their champion. So that is how they made their agent, as they say. But we'll talk of that later on, please. And also, it is implied in this that the British, whoever contacted him, said, look here, when you reach the age of 40, 15 years from now, or more, then you make this claim. How stupid, how childish. But that is a different issue, we'll come to that later on. Tomorrow, inshallah, I'll start with the story from where I left. Okay?
Inshallah.